Okay, so moving on to adding the clouds, we're going to add another solid layer. So again, right click to make sure you're in the main owl composition here. We can close the owl pre-comp actually, so we don't get confused between them. So on the main owl composition, we've got the owl layer and the sky layer. We right click in the empty space and new solid layer. We're going to call this one Cloud 1. Change the colour to a cloud colour, it's kind of white. Okay, we're going to use the ellipse shape tool again. I'm going to drag out a few ellipses to create a kind of cloud shape. Okay, basic cloud shape. Okay, now you'll see as I drag those out, these are all actually masks. So these are the unmasked areas that are white. Sorry, rephrase that. Say that again. These are the masked areas that are white. So we've got 7 little independent masks here. If we shift click on all of them because we want this to be one object, press F for feather, and you'll see the feather property appears, and then we'll increase the feather setting until you've got a reasonably blurred edge, cloud-like edge. Okay, so we've created our cloud. Click on the cloud layer and press U just to compress that. Okay, and then we want to access the position and the scale properties for the cloud. So we drag the cloud before we do that below the owl, and then cloud 1 still selected. Press P for position, and then hold down Shift and S to access the scale property as well. Move the playhead back to the beginning. Okay, and then if we set the position and scale there, clicking on the 2 timers, and then just manually, I think using the selection tool, we'll just shift that cloud up to top left. We can perhaps scale it a bit as well, so we can scale it manually there. Top left. So I'm going to scale up a bit further. What we're basically after is these clouds are going to be getting slightly smaller as the owl flies towards us. I'll scale that up a bit at the beginning there, and then if we move the playhead to the end of the composition and just scale it, do that again, scale it down. You can change the values here, obviously. Do it this way if you want, whichever you prefer, and then move that maybe slightly further back. Click on position there, shift that back to see how that looks. It's only going to be a gradual movement of the cloud. So you see the cloud slowly moving backwards as the owl moves forwards. Okay, we can just repeat that. We can actually duplicate our cloud here. So select the cloud layer, Control D. I just want to rename that. So rename that. Oops, not that. Do that again. Duplicate, Control D, rename. We just call it Cloud 2. And then Cloud 2 we can shift somewhere else. Oh, we've got to be careful here. So when we move it, just 1 second. So obviously we already have keyframes set up here, so we want to click on those initial keyframes, change the position here, and then again the final position there. Okay, so that looks okay. Maybe spend a bit more time refining that, but you understand the basic principle of that. Okay, final thing we're going to do is create a cloud that starts off in the foreground and moves in front of the owl and then behind it. So what we need to do there is animate the cloud along the z-axis into three-dimensional space. So again, we're going to copy an existing cloud, so Control D, and we'll rename this cloud 3. If we just go inside the, sorry, let me just tidy things up a bit here. So with Cloud 3, if we press U to access its properties, we just want to remove any of these keyframes that we'd created. So we'll just drag a selection over those and delete. Removed any animation there. With the playhead at the start here, I'm just going to move the cloud down to the foreground. Okay, so I've positioned our Cloud 3 in the bottom left hand corner here, so we can just scale, without setting any keyframes initially, we can just scale it up a bit. Now the important thing to think about with the z-axis is that the owl is at 0 on the z-axis. So if we move the cloud, the minus value of the cloud increases, that means it's coming further into the foreground. Okay, if it decreases and reaches 0, okay, it's on the same point on the z-axis as the owl, and then if the z-axis value increases, it goes behind the owl, which is at 0. So I hope that makes sense. Now to see this happen, we've turned on the 3D layer, we've turned the Cloud 3 layer into a 3D layer. We also need to turn the owl into a 3D layer. Okay, so if I now move the cloud along the z-axis here, you'll see as it gets to 0 and beyond 0, it moves behind the owl. Okay, so we want to animate that now basically. So I'm going to move the minus value of the z-axis of the cloud to a kind of fairly high minus number. You can scale the cloud as well independently here, again without setting any keyframes. So now once we're happy with that, I'll just shift it up a bit. There we go, on the y-axis. So I'm now going to select the position, set the position, okay, at 0 here, and then I'm going to move the playhead right to the end, and I'm going to reset the z-axis until the cloud has moved behind the owl. Okay, so if we scrub the playhead, see how that looks, not too bad. Again, test. Okay, there we go. Now just a final thing, say you've animated this cloud and you decide that you want to just shift the position a bit. Can cause problems if you start changing the position, because what it will do, so if I just say I decide I want to, say about a third of the way through the animation, I just want to shift its position a bit. Sorry, just auto-saving there. Just one sec. I move it, but what it will do is it will create a keyframe there, so it's gonna kind of skew the animation a bit. It's going to change direction, isn't it, at this point? So say at this, I'm looking at the animation at this point, and I just want the cloud to be shifted a bit. The way to do that without changing the position is to click on the layer and press A for anchor point, and then what you're doing is you're moving the anchor point of the whole animation, so it shifts the whole kind of anchor point or center point of the whole thing, if that makes sense. So I'm just going to select anchor point and shift the anchor point, so that shifts, like I said, the center point of the whole animation rather than shifting, the position of the animation at a certain point. It shifts the position of the whole thing. So I hope that makes sense. So anchor point is quite useful for that. If you want to change the position of an animation after you've created it without interfering with the animation, use anchor point. Alright, so that's the end of the pin tool animation.